Faith eclipses Evangelion's angst. Contextualized by Japan's lost decade, an economic depression, unemployed citizens shutting in their homes. The apocalyptic backdrop of natural disasters like Kubi's earthquake took over 5,000 lives from the lack of governmental aid. Over 10,000 joined the Om Shinrikyo, a doomsday cult, to find salvation by Armageddonizing the collective that wronged them, suiciding to kill and injure over 6,000. Confronting Misanthropy, a suicidal animator abused his crass medium to explore his life's experience, finding meaning through his Shinseki Evangelion, or Gospel of a New Century. Scientists' abuse of a godlike being, Adam, cataclysmizes most life. Years later, despite global warming, society is revived. Its economy, the production, circulation, and consumption of goods, so even stores' shelves fill. Yet, despite suppression of knowledge, it's known the end nears. The future leaders, children, are few. Tokyo was destroyed, replaced by a decoy for a new capital, Tokyo 3, defending against ambiguous enemies ordained as Old Testament angels. In this world, the teenage Shinji shrinks from human contact, drowning out the noise of his cruel world with his broken Walkman while hunching to save the eyes. He faces cross formations, symbolizing life's pain, and his environment, scaling industrially to dwarf him into insignificance alongside his physically imposing father, Gendo. Towers resemble tombstones, triggering a flashback to running from Gendo at his mother's grave. He escapes into nature to find he believes he's worthless, so much so he can't take his own life. Gendo drafts him against the angels with his equally ambiguous Evas. His peers, Rei and Asuka, are all commanded by Misato, an immature woman guarding him and Asuka. They're orphaned, lonesome, and traumatized, into misanthropizing the angels' absolute terror fields, which pronounce the psychological barriers that divide people and cause pain. The angels breach the pilot's AT fields to confront their self-loathing, thinning their distinction from humans as Shinji fights them in place of Gendo, and Asuka humanizes an angel who severs her Eva's arms. They attack with and die as crosses to symbolize humanity's true target, the self. The Evas power through umbilical cables as the pilots immerse in the blood, or LCL, of Lilith, mankind's mother, a womb-like state of protection from others. Likewise, Seele, the Kabbalists supporting Gendo, draw to mysticism's promise to end pain. Using Abrahamic prophecies, they fight the divine with the Evas, cloned from the Talmudic Adam and Lilith, to house the souls of the pilot's mothers, who rebel as natural beings. Criticizing Gendo and Seilei's belief, reason dominionizes reality, as they don't understand human will. They intend godhood by destroying AT fields, merging all to end pain. In contrast, Shinji comes of age to embrace pain. Feeling unlovable, he seeks acceptance by becoming a pilot who fights for others' sakes. But he alienates further as his classmates, Toji and Kensuke, bully him for accidentally maiming Toji's sister in the Eva. He escapes to gallantly face his city, his burden, before hunching in the fetus position to gaze at suicide until they express sympathy from being protected by him, realizing they, as most, accept his heroic suffering while neglecting his despair, echoed by Kensuke's military and piloting fantasies. Absorbed through a shadow-leaking LCL into the spiritual womb, the angel Leliel teaches one's identity divides into two selves, symbolizing two crosses, the former being others' judgments, the latter self-perception. He esteems as an abandoned child in need of nurturing, recognizing himself donning the striped shirt he wore when orphaned, also patterning Leliel's body, who converses with him as if also him. The sun, one's potential, and the shadow, one's unknown driving feelings, positioned between the two selves. Shinji's speech verticalizes one's self-perception, and Leliel's speech horizontalizes others' judgments, forming the cross. Connection with others is self-confrontation. Gendo's praise bridges two vertical lines with a horizontal line, showing Shinji's ego sustains with what little praise his piloting receives, shutting his eyes and ears from the cross-flashing rejection, esteemed as how others truly feel about him. Despite piloting with different clothes, he becomes a piloting suit in the Eva's womb, explained as his desired self. He births as it before his maternal figures, Rei and Misato, join his mother to coax him out in the nude, promising he can be loved for his true self. Misato cries for him, paralleling her tears after his mother also coaxes him out of Leliel's womb. Still, he neglects others, specifically Misato and Asuka, as they perish in their shared struggle for love. Misato cries, her arms descend across to him, and he escapes to his room to drown her out with music to again cover his eyes and ears from the cross, his true self. He fights the divine for their otherness to kill his self, appearing his Eva as Oni-like, demonic. Likewise, he fears it, his mother, for revealing her agency in flesh. Misato empathizes with his orphanage and strives to amend hers by caring for him, embodying maternity and fatherhood by being drill sergeant-like, as she criticizes him selfishly piloting for acceptance. Yet, she seeks revenge on the angels for killing her father in Adam's cataclysm, hypocritically donning his cross to signify opposition to the divine. Her failure to embrace the cross shares his selfish drive to end pain, making her similarly undeveloped and unable to nurture him. After seeing her unwillingness to care for herself, her alcoholism, disorderliness, and being single while her peers marry, he paternalizes for her by cooking and cleaning after her. She becomes dependent on him by describing him like her father, alongside her partner, Kaji, who resembles him and petrifies her with guilt, giving her the same injuries on her cheek and womb. She endures his sexual abuse from believing she deserves defilement, veiled by her professionalist ego, and sanely debases herself to Shinji, also seeking his acceptance of her flaws in place of her father's, seeking their right hands with her left. She expresses being like Shinji while striving for his, thus, her father's praise, to escape her need for self-worth. Shinji disgusts from her debasion, actually fearing intimacy, paralleling his fight against Sakiel, before rejoicing she's accepted him. Yet, he accepts her care while neglecting she needs love, plunging her into loneliness so great, following Kaji's death, she resorts to failed sexual advances, framed to sit on his lap in front of a phallic chair. She's forced to seek companionship from her pet, reducing her to Ritsuko's condition, who uses cats for companionship over Gendo's. Misato fails to connect with Shinji by believing she knows what he desires by being a woman. Likewise, Asuka's her conundrum. Betrayed by her mother's suicide, Asuka strives to superiorize the collective that betrays and sexually preys on others, accomplishing and piloting an academic feats to escape into false adulthood, dispelled by the significantly older Kaji, who rejects her for the immature Misato. She presumes Misato redeems her flaws through sexuality to intensify her belief once valued for sexuality, sourced from her father's affair. Her stepmom's dishonesty, covering her face, worsens Asuka's envy of Misato's nurturing from Shinji, demanding similar treatment while trying to rouse him by poorly projecting as a sexual libertine, donning Misato's oversized yellow shirt. They introduce the suggestive yellow clothing, colorizing they sexualize themselves for acceptance. Likewise, Ritsuko's dyed yellow hair colorizes her self-objectification for Gendo, only applying makeup in his presence. Sharing apathetic love interests, they attract to significantly older men who were dating their neglectful maternal figures, Naoko, Ritsuko's mother, and Misato. Both avert having children, mothers suicided, despise Rei's embodiment of their insecurity, objectify themselves, dolls for Asuka, white cats for Ritsuko, and decry Misato's trysts with Kaji while being attracted to him. Fitly, Misato punishes their neglect of Shinji's plight, attacking Ritsuko while domestically neglecting Asuka, callously descending her into volcanic depths, ignoring her personal's protests. Metaphorizing Asuka, Sand Dolphin hastily matures physically to protect itself, sounding psychological immaturity through baby groans. Its right hand attacks Asuka before Shinji's left, saves her right hand, symbolizing Asuka's aggression and Shinji's tenderness, like the angel Israfel's yang and yin, colored after their plug suits and its divided halves. They settle their animosity to defeat it. In training, Shinji, instead of escaping, shares his earbuds with her to dance together. They synchronistically fight potential, white, and desire, red, before defeating the singular Israfel, synonymizing animosity with self-loathing. Music also sounds their failure to connect. After hearing Shinji's performance of Bach, Asuka mistakes she's seen his intimate side, traumatizing her when he doesn't intimize her feelings after she kisses him. He rejects her while playing You Are the Only One from a video game, singing of a chosen hero, which he loops to sustain his ego by escaping his, thus, other's need for love. Likewise, she plays video games before crying as her friend reassures her flaws. They're piloting, and for Shinji, playing music, using both to delude feeling needed, are escapes from their true selves, video games, low culture, their immaturity. So, she resents him for counseling her ego by, alongside making her feel physically undesired, succeeding her piloting. They objectify themselves to escape each other, consequently, themselves. Resultantly, Kaji's objectified by her. Like Shinji, he doesn't allow others to understand him, as Asuka unintentionally compares him to Misato for fronting facades appealing others' desire, alongside double-crossing Gendo and Seilei to spy for both. After despairing quietly over meeting her, he feigns virility from Misato. Like her, he neglects Asuka to prefer Shinji, sharing his people-pleasing and tenderness. Framed to water him, his gardening hobby motifs successfully nurturing Shinji as he inspires him to demand the Eva from Gendo, contrasted with him refusing to pilot. But his hobby's secrecy prevents him from further nurturing Shinji, from being unwilling to develop his true, tender self. In this submissive position, he confesses sustaining his ego by serving others to feel needed. Misato equates him to Shinji by being lonesome, albeit uninterested in others, imitating Shinji's passive suicidality by paralleling submission to sexual objectification from Misato and Asuka. Likewise, Shinji shares Kaji's indifference to his death, since Kaji reflects himself, only acknowledging it to torture Asuka. While he refuses to understand others, Gendo manipulates them into directing their angst against the divine. He only shares his plans with Fuyutsuki through coercion, having already dominated him by marrying their love interest, coupling with his violence breaking his right hand, merging with Adam, archetyping masculinity in the same hand, his failed attempt to abuse Lilith, archetyping femininity, to represent failed masculinity, Adam embryonizing his childlikeness. By abusing the archetypes, he alters reality to satisfy his long-held desire to merge with his wife, Yui, changing his surname to hers. Her death insecurizes him to neglect Shinji, confessing to feeling unloved, likely only to hurt him, actually saving himself, since nurturing Shinji means facing his own weakness, shown through the pink elevator doors enclosing both in the womb. Conquesting godhood imitates Shinji's escapism, his only motivation being to end his pain following Yui's death, extending the shadow of the cross from his back, covering his mouth while sharing his plans for godhood. His exposed eyes peer his unexpressed self-loathing. To better protect from Shinji, he starts covering his mouth, hands, and eyes with lens colored after AT fields, shielding his own self, enhancing Fuyutsuki's split shadow to share loss from Yui's death, his intensifying escape from self-loathing. But Fuyutsuki is stopped by a caution sign, refusing to follow Gendo's escapism by supporting her in preventing his and Seilei's shared plans. Gendo rejects Shinji to become the Star of David, tastelessly symbolizing, despite deceiving the Kabbalist Seilei, their shared escape, imitating them by only communicating with Shinji through voice calls, physically hidden. Contrastingly, his uncovered hands burn while his glasses crack in LCL from lowering his AT field for Rei. While her consciousness as Lilith, trapped inside an Eva, tries to kill Gendo, he doesn't fear her because he's stolen her agency, crucifying her to humanity, her bandaged right arm and eye signifying complete submission. She poorly assumes the fetal position while classmate Swin, longing to join them in LCL as the rotated two crosses/selves on the gate posit her in humanity as insecurity, separated from humanity, her potential, joining them in sexual objectification to share their abuse. But Shinji claims interest only in her isolation, striving to give her the love he needs by being courteous in her apartment, despite her indifference. He finds Gendo's glasses shattered from lowering his AT field. Longing to end his pain, he dons them to symbolically merge with him, only then inspiring Rei to leave her shower, LCL, to materialize and protect Gendo, pacifying again as he gropes her, slapping him not then, but later, for insulting Gendo. Her apathy towards her vulnerability parallels to his nudity, their distance representing to him sniping the angel Ramiel, its inorganic blue appearance is his understanding of her. He parallels her rescue from Gendo, waking her to their similarity, but while she confesses not knowing Gendo, he becomes closer with her by loving her as a human, sharing her pain of piloting not just for Gendo, but to relate with all, foreshadowing awakening her divine consciousness in his Eva, cloned from her body. She soliloquizes the material world as transient, allowing one to change, underlined by the spiritual, the cross being the pain of not understanding ourselves, and nature's comfort our non-interpersonal understanding. The sun's isolation contrasts the comfort of water's uniformity, likened to Gendo's desire to become LCL, relating her clonage to fields of flowers, insecurizing single flowers, her individuality as insignificant in the collective. Her self-loathing reddens the sky, colorizing the desire she's inhumanly incapable of. LCL, her red menstrual blood, joins the angel's cores to colorize the desire to lose oneself, likened to sexual ecstasy as their AT fields are cleaved for penetration. Ariel's invasion of Asuka's AT field tastelessly likens rape by facing her with the self, paralleling Ritsuko's symbolic rape and their loss of self-worth from realizing Gendo sacrificed them in Rei's place, preferring her inhuman submission, colorized with her blue hair. Never learning her name, she immediately rejects Asuka from insecurizing over her overt humanity, colorized with her red hair to reflect her insecurity, paralleling Rei's clonage with feeling doll-like, what her mother confused for her, tripping of forcefully merging with clones. They ignore each other. Until Rei advises her to reconcile with her mother, unconsciously asking Asuka to reconcile with Rei for blessing her with humanity, guarding the pink elevator doors, the womb, from her. But she attacks Rei, projecting onto her by calling her a doll, and closing Asuka in the womb. Ariel takes over to strip Asuka's clothes, her ego, yet she refuses to mature into facing her true self, cowering fetally in a playground. Ariel forces her to see she esteems as the doll her mother strangled, losing her sanity with the ability to pilot, and, with nothing else to identify, loses will, contrasting waiting to die in a bathtub with refusing to bathe in the same water as Misato and Shinji, paralleling their presence as Ritsuko murders Rei's clones. Trying to superiorize collectives, masks seeking validation, objectifying themselves and believing their true selves can't be loved. Echoing Shinji, Asuka gazes the cross formation glaring in the sun, Rei's unique object, to reject the pain needed to reach her potential, introduced facing away from the sun, enshrouded. She carries herself by ignoring her true feelings, paralleled while projecting onto Shinji. Ariel reveals her true self with a beam of light, made divine through Hallelujah, as the angels punish her efforts to individualize, with Gagiel forcing her into water, LCL, while ingesting her alongside Sandolphin, and Material reaping LCL on her. She associates with the sun while rejecting the shadow to symbolize egoism, a false conception of oneself, contrasting Rei's association with the moon, or unconsciousness, as she forces others to recognize their insecurity, also done divinely by inducting into the shared consciousness to confront Shinji as his shadow. Yet, she insecurizes from Shinji forcing her to face her inhumanity, imitated by her own self. Water flows, inducting from LCL into humanity. Yet, she contrasts with Asuka, who resents her periods, as a woman who does not bleed, longing for Asuka's human vulnerability. She compares her breeding humanity, with parents breeding children, humans creating cities and technology, and perhaps God's creation of humanity, the moon darkening her understanding from questioning whether others can consider her human. She settles believing her physical and spiritual existence, yet she doesn't understand herself, mobbed by clones on the moon. She isolates to study her body, believing she's humanly an object, thus loses the sense of self, embodying an object falling past the sun into LCL, colorized by the sun either rising or setting, her potential to materialize or die. If she's not an object, she asks if she can be loved as her left eye. The need for love inducts her into daytime to face her contacts, ordered by closeness. Since Gendo's her farthest, she gains Yui's resentment. Her soul invades Shinji's in desperation for his love before striving to kill Ritsuko's relationship with Gendo, paralleling Rei disregarding herself to resemble Yui, attacking Naruko's relationship with Gendo. Her doors unlocked as she sleeps in her blood, decaying industry, self-loathingly peering into her red eyes from believing, as a goddess, she exists only to serve humanity, objectifying herself like Shinji to share his suicidality. Armisela appears as the human she desires to be, menstruating while immersed in LCL, to seduce her into becoming one. After realizing she's projected her loneliness onto it, she cries from waking to a desire for love. It conceives its dead companions through her, before striving to merge her with Shinji, realizing she loves him. She faces her replaceability through Gendo and cries more. Feeling her divinity makes her desire for Shinji's love unrequitable, she ascends to godhood from sacrificing herself to protect him. Consequently, her replacement bears divine consciousness, bringing her to destroy Gendo's glasses from his abuse. But she stops as tears resurface from an unknown well. She no longer understands loneliness, lacking the prior relationships that humanized her. Now embracing her inhumanity by maternally watching over Shinji in suspicion of Kaworu, he faces the sunset, believing his life's ending. He recalls his lost contacts except Kaji, whom he accepts Kaworu in place of. While he drowns Misato out before rejecting her sexual embrace, her left hand reaching past his earbuds to his right from desiring his love, he removes his earbuds for Kaworu's right hand on his left, accepting his love from his demanding none in return. They infatuate for idealizing each other, sharing love for music and messianism, also sharing passive suicidality, nurturing and philosophizing with Kaji, who pessimizes none can understand each other. Kaworu affirms all is lonely, but had the choice to embrace intimacy's pain by striving to understand each other. He expands Misato's father's description as delicate to all, for sharing the need for love, and, while Shinji stares at him and Rei out of water, divinely separate from humanity to allure an ability to hurt him, Kaworu stares at him in water, his humanity alluring love. While Kaji faces away, eyes closed from giving up, Shinji stares to the left from seeking to be loved, his eyes only later met by Kaworu, yet they both escape. While Shinji turns right from love once Misato begs for it, he imitates her by treating his love interest as a father figure, echoed by Kaworu expressing by merging with his divine body as Adam. He imitates Gendo striving for godhood. Like him, Kaji, and Ritsuko, he places his hands back in his pockets to hide his true feelings from his love interest. Lilith's body replaces his to realize intending godhood shares Seele, or all's desire for regression into the womb, synonymizing death, as he steps from green to red, from humanly nurturing Shinji, Kaji's garden, to control Unit 2, redly embodying Asuka's suicidal desire, alongside Nerve's motto, Gods in Heaven, stared at by him while speaking of the fear of being hurt by others. Conflicted to act from either divinity or newfound humanity, his feet remain underwater after trying to leave LCL, his left foot leading him to die for humanity's sake. Through pain, humanity superiorizes divinity by adhering the desire for love. He follows the decision made by leaving Shinji in LCL to embrace his greatest pain, the light darkening from humanity, his potential, to inhumanity, his shadow, sacrificing his potential to be loved for Shinji's. While Kaji dies turned from the cross, rejecting the self to refuse love, Kaworu's turned from the Luft's mask, rejecting Seilei's symbol for womb regression to protect love, which he's introduced as by humming the Ode to Joy, singing of love. Shinji listens to it ahead of meeting him again, before it worships their next, final meeting. He hesitates. Kaworu's head falls on LCL before streetlights. Shinji's returned to their meeting spot, now longing to join Kaworu. Yet, paralleling Asuka, he is unable to drown, having lost all will in imitation of Kaworu's passive suicidality. Listening to his uncharged Walkman to embody escape, hiding fetally to allow Seele to massacre Nerve. Imitating the divine, Misato sacrifices her need for love by using her right hand to lead Shinji's left to the cross, also joining her father and hunching over to dip her hands and giving the treatment they desired to receive. Her hair is purple to colorize her need to have her darkness cared for, unlike Shinji, who leads his feet with the right from green to purple to merge from sharing the same darkness, paralleled with leading his purple Ava's right foot to destroy a green phone, destroying his potential through his connections with others to become an ego. Yet, he falls from his left foot, his need for love crippling his desire to lose the self, plunging him into the darkness, his loneliness he longs to escape. Likewise, the atmosphere purples before failing to bear Sahaku's burden on his own. Its hands, an orange color, desiring objectification, is only defeated once his peers join. The same darkness is shared, only healed by connecting with others. His eyes turn purple when he stares at Kaji's garden from longing for him to nurture his sadness, as opposed to potential. So, she forces him from purple to green, following Kaji's wish for her to nurture Shinji's potential in his stead, asking him for validation of her send-off for Shinji. Lilith's presence inducting into the spiritual. Imitating her father, she uses her agency with her need for love to pass Shinji the cross to his right hand, and, realizing she's unfit to maternally nurture him, shot in the womb to carry the same injury from her father's death, she, like Kaworu, objectifies herself to harmonize him, into manhood by committing to being a self. As a result of her selflessness, which she criticizes Kaworu and her father for, she, like them, dies to become divine, the cross stained with her blood. Yet, Shinji returns to the fetal position as he clutches the womb in rejection of the self. Asuka's in the fetal position in water, LCL, but she chants of wanting to live. As like to her mother's demand to suicide together, and, contrasting shutting the doors to her darkness opened by Aurel to only enter her potential, confronts her darkness to fulfill Rei's advice, allowing her mother to bring her to her potential, and merging her from the womb as a self. She lifts a battleship, her namesake, contrasting destroying collective battleships to become an ego, to defend against the military, paralleling their battle against Sakiel through self-acceptance representing feared otherness. She leaps over the cross to fight collective Evas, but is stopped with the spear of Longinus piercing her left eye, used to kill Christ, archetyping individuality. Succeeding the angel's attempts to ingest her, the Evas gore her, like Rei's clones, who gleam from lacking the sense of self, by eating her womb to objectify her through a vulnerability, purple blood, giving her the same injury as Misato. Having been alone her entire life, Asuka holds her left eye with her left hand to nurture herself, and, contrasting waiting to die, lifts her shadowed right hand from her womb to the sun to find her true self-worth, surpassing femininity, contrasting Rei, whose hand leads right to commit suicide, while Asuka leads left in desiring love. Collective split her hand, like her mother's soul, the human population after second impact, Misato's body, the product of Seele, or all's evil will. The winged white Eva collective are society's patriarchal rejection of potential to objectification, to kill her for being more than a womb. Sensing Shinji's pain from Asuka's loss, Rei sends the spear from the moon to his Eva's yellow neck to grant his unconscious suicidal desire, forming the Kabbalist Sephiroth to place him in the Zera Anpin, to unify Adam with Lilith, or masculine with feminine, making up for what each person lacks to collectivize into godhood. Having destroyed Gendo's glasses from resenting his abuse, she shares suicidality from being a goddess with nobody to serve. She bathes in LCL from trying to end her pain by again objectifying herself for Gendo, but she observes what's left of her clones to despair from serving him and intensifies their passive suicidality to lose form, her left arm falling to signify losing the desire to be loved as Gendo merges with her through Adam, grabbing her left breast with his right hand, likened to sexual assault, by Bardiel using its right hand to forcefully merge with her left. In contrast, Shinji accidentally grabs her right breast with his left hand, offering the same hand to her right from desiring her love, as opposed to taking advantage of Asuka by using his right hand to force her from seeking love to objectification. So, she steals his right hand, his agency, imitating Yui, her left eye brightening to regain her left hand and defy Gendo, protecting Shinji. Paralleling Misato, the now pregnant Lilith welcomes Rei home as a maternal figure nurturing her into darkness, or inhumanity, its purple mask also recalling Shinji's Eva, its craters referencing the Black Moon, its womb, or humanity's shared desire for regression, thus her desire to merge with Shinji. Yet, he barely holds the cross in his left hand, praying to stay alive from desiring love, contrasting Sele's prayer for him to fail his third trial of the womb. In the same prayer position with her still in front of him, after humanizing her by naming her, he asks her help to overcome his guilt for killing Kaworu, before she fangs Kaworu, embracing him with both of his hands, contrasting only using his right to affirm Shinji's humanity. The spear penetrates them into ecstasy after Yui, contrasting protecting him with her right hand, coaxes him into the womb with her left hand, longing to be nurtured into godhood, promising merging, will deliver his desire to objectify Asuka, colored yellow, by extension, all into maternal figures. He ripples into the spiritual womb. An incomplete pyramid symbolizes nerves, or his decision to pilot, playing the cello, having taken up both for his ego. He builds the pyramid while the passage of time swings his entire life as an empty playground chanting of acceptance and rejection, with children singing open hands, close hands, the yellow sun his ego between purple breast-shaped hills, contrasting with potential between two crosses to sustain his ego from nurturing a poor understanding of his self. Caricatures of Rei and Asuka as dolls. His conception of them as the objectification they resent appear to signify him meeting them, gleaming from piloting without acknowledging them. They position with his conception of Misato as faceless, only recognizable as a mother who neglects him, to divide over an uncrossable barrier that descends into red to end the song. With no possibility of rejection or acceptance, His isolation allures suicide. He cries before continuing to pilot as his cheeks mark him as a clown, the sky darkening his vanishing life as a light to the right. His back represents Kawaru's death. Paralleling trying to destroy Nerve's pyramid, his ego lowers past the hills before being covered by the swing. Stuck in isolation, another right light brightens while left stays dark from believing love can't exist. Darkness surrounds his desire to continue piloting, done from self-loathing, represented by Seilei's logo as an inverted pyramid with 7 eyes, corresponding to the Ava's eyes, symbolizing using the divine to revert human progress to death, merging him with Rei, the lights behind him, her eyes watching him. Having shared his experience, Asuka insults him to balance purple on her green backdrop, succeeded by blue, his color of submission through escape, cushioning him calling her out for being the same. His now purple eyes peer their shared need for nurturing. Graded purple, joined by Misato, who neglects Asuka to explain her inability to nurture him through sex with Kaji, speaking over her fan, colored yellow, of needing physical objectification to sustain her ego. Shinji holds the cross in his left hand, resenting her needs, hindering her from tending to its darkness. The surroundings reduce to her fan while she escapes from facing her self-loathing through Shinji. Right at the wall's cross to stand in yellow, paralleling the fan, backdropped yellow, behind Kaji before crossing to his left. By rejecting the cross, they fan themselves by believing their true selves are hated to justify averting intimacy. So, Asuka dons Misato's yellow shirt to deceive him into letting her close as an object to attack his selfishness, referencing his escape into piloting, his right hand contrasting his mother's left to commit to objectifying her. They're blaming each other, dissonates with them rejecting each other, colorized from the desire to self-objectify. His anger masks anxiety and embarrassment. Her inability to present as more than an object from not understanding herself brings her to demand his devotion to understanding her, imitating him with purple eyes. She's facing away from Rei, her insecurity, who joins her right at the cross in yellow, as Asuka and Shinji's object, who unintentionally ships them by bearing the cross on them, contrasting Kaji and Misato, who, without Rei's intervention, continue objectifying each other. As their marriage counselor, Rei reveals Asuka's critiques of Shinji also target herself, sharing escape from others to sustain the ego. This seeming contrast dispels through Misato and Ritsuko's outfit color inversion. Misato and Shinji's loneliness represent through non-calling them, while Ritsuko and Asuka's failed independence stem from loneliness. Shinji's life represents as a train, the sunset his, alongside Kaji's, awareness is an action near his death. Asuka walks backwards perpendicular to tracks at nighttime, unaware she's sharing a fixed path, only realizing after turning from believing her egoism will end with Kaji's affection, leading her to Shinji, death. Her isolation flashes after she's collectivized, seeking his hand to validate worth beyond objectification, but he doesn't hold her until she's comatose, removing her top to mold her into his desired maternal object, and masturbates into the hand she needs. He objectifies to avert rejection, his fear of women traumatizing him once Shamshell, the female reproductive system, defeats his drives to distance, cutting his umbilical cable after forced to face it. Its phallic shape, alongside Gendo's shadow from Yui's grave, shows Shinji's neglect lends synonymous fear of femininity and masculinity. Submitting to him and Toji, shadowed from fearing his own masculinity before Bardiel, containing Toji. Gendo switches control to raise consciousness, Shinji's unconsciousness, to parallel the punch Shinji unconsciously desires to give Toji. He chokes his own self in front of the cross, murdering his shadow for overcoming his efforts to neglect it with its extended arms, silencing Toji's strive to reach his potential by sacrificing his ego as a basketball player to earn his sister's medical care, to protect his ego at the expense of their need for love. He distances from the cross to imitate the fetal position while asking caricatured sexual objects of Rei, Misato, and Asuka, his desired versions of them, to be open with him. The actual Rei's warning that facing their true selves would hurt him is shut down by his purple eyes beckoning they devote themselves to him, and, after turning to their true selves from his left, desiring their love, is granted the truth. Like when comatose, he asks Asuka to nurture him, expecting complicity. Having gained self-worth, she rejects the objectification of her yellow shirt to defend herself from his pink shirt's womb, spilling the coffee on him that represents Kaji's death. His right arm stained with LCL, he smashes the 2 empty mugs, representing their unwillingness to die, contrasting Kaji, paralleling Ritsuko's broken mug. I need you, he begs, paralleling Gendo to Ritsuko, who, with Asuka, responds, liar, and is shot in her chest as Misato aims her gun at, sharing Naoko's injury from suiciding on the computer representing her maternity. Moreover, she kills Ritsuko with a computer representing her femininity, imitating Asuka's death from striving to overcome femininity, forcing Mitsuko into LCL as Shinji, combining his left hand, desiring nurturing, with his right, agency, stained with the power to kill the self, chokes Asuka for realizing her worth, dragging her with him to kill humanity, the final angel. The vertical part of the cross flashes without the horizontal, others' judgments. The other dies. Shinji's glee from killing Zorella joins Naoko strangling Rei, him choking Toji, and Asuka's potential in darkness, or duality, merges into desire. Their lives flash before their eyes. The red episode halves indicating fulfillment of desire for paternal figures in death, the inverted halves potential from confrontation of Shinji's fear of intimacy. Watercolors of humanity destroying nature regress the animation with humanity to the womb, echoed by Keel as the beginning and end being the same, alongside Asuka's introduction and death outside of Enritsuko's and LCL. Nerve's motto, God's in heaven, all's right, joins him gleaming, it is good, an imitation of God. Contrasting boss calms Suzatod's religious death, the pop song stolen from Pachelbel's canon and the Beatles ecstatically lyricizes suicide into the capitalistic collective. The collective Evas, now female objects, penetrate themselves with the spear to orgasm from death. All enter Rei's womb. Shinji plunges the self into the womb through Rei's consciousness, fulfilling his desire for objectification, representing as a collective of sexualized women colored blue, to join his piloting suit and ecstasy shirt to colorize escape, alongside Kaji's top, who confuses Lilith for Adam and objectified women for masculinity, equating the modern conception of masculinity with objectified femininity, acting as a sexual object that submits to others by giving what he believes they want, criticized by Misato, while dominating as self-objectifying to objectify others, equating his spying ego with Shinji's piloting, who narcissistically confuses Kaji's femininity, contrasting her disorderliness, poor diet, beer binging, with orderliness, growing food, and coffee addiction, for gayness, rejecting his platonic invitation from thinking he's attracted to him. In contrast, Kaworu realizes he has mistaken his body for Lilith's from desiring self-objectification. Rei entices all to merge with objectified versions of their female love interests, the desired egos, including the apparently resistant Alba, who parallels Asuka's individualism by killing at will and by mocking faith in science, Kaworu's, who recognizes individualism as the desire to become a superior ego, a collective. All long for womanhood, even women, from conditioning to equate objectification with women, believing the female object is painless. Like Misato, Shinji and Gendo cover their wombs with their left hands around their love interest from desiring their acceptance of their feminine aspects they're conditioned to insecurize, whereas Kaji, spying, joins Asuka in holding his womb with his right hand to act towards objectified femininity as she grieves over her lack of assets in yellow, staring into water to equate longing to self-objectify with suicidality. In contrast, Keel, adapted from a Nazi eugenist, conscientizes suicidality as all fascist longing to become objectified collectives and capable of being hurt. All unisonly march towards godhood, indistinguishable. Contrasting Kaworu's rejection of his fascist belief of being a superior collective, with no desired self, Keel dies from his own will. Gendo, on the shadowed half of the two crosses/selves, is judged by Shinji's closest, as Yui's clothes turn purple to follow Rei's ingestion of his right arm and hers of Zorella's core, as her Eva, sharing his white eyes when focused on godhood, which he stares at as his potential beyond his selves, cloned from Lilith's legs and right arm, eats him legs up with her left hand to nurture his self into godhood. Literally his description of instrumentality as completing what one lacks. His body's halved alongside the LCL shown through his glasses, and the totally submissive Rei picks him up, from green to red, with Yui's same hand to fill with LCL, nurturing herself into joining him in instrumentality, as the three selves existing in his mind, where one's concept of others and oneself merge with actual selves before becoming one. Considering love, Shinji's left eye peers his selves to an exit sign before he faces all's rejection to industrial ambiance. Animated frames with serious merchandise as crosses, eyes, rain, and cats etch in, merging humans with objects. The faint sunrises or sets as the potential for beginning and end fade. Blood splatters humanity's pain. His screams for the end are drawn before the objectified Misato and Rei dominate him underwater, swinging regression into the warmth of nude bodies and sexual embrace, unifying body with soul. Still desiring love, he refuses, but believes he's worthless to others by not piloting, and affirms death. Rei confronts why he has hands. His right bears her blood over her body, her burden by piloting for her sake, before bearing his semen over Asuka's body, willing her as a pornographic object, joining Gendo bearing Adam's embryo and willing regression to the womb, contrasting Rei bearing her own blood, serving humanity. Shinji's right hand wavers when hesitant, clenches when committing, always meeting pain, so both hands join to destroy AT fields and choke, killing oneself through the other, as Naoko does to cancel her own identity, considered worthless by Gendo, plunging to death to join Shinji and Kaji, saving their need for love over others by lifting them to dominance. In contrast, after lowering himself to reject Misato's need for love, she lowers herself to clasp Shinji's neck, forcing him into the masculine ego, which he rejects from his dominance, causing Kaworu's death. Ray flips his right hand to show he can commit to love, his left on the phone now right to seek connections over acceptance. Believing he'll stay unloved, he collectivizes further. She flips hands to show others' need for his love, but he accepts his hands merging with Asuka's, flipped away from love, before rejecting Misato's, and kills intimacy through angels. Ray faces him with Misato's efforts to love him, attaching his life's purpose to the desire for love. He asks if he can be loved, but, with no other, faces silence. Screams! Collectivizes and destroys his own animation cells. He denies willing others' death, like Gendo, who challenges Seilei's overt suicidality by promising acceleration to the end of evolution, God, after accelerating Iroh's evolution to the end, death itself. Likewise, Shinji's Walkman fast-forwards while childlikely seeking Asuka's breasts, leading in to assault her to affirm his manhood. She cries for her mother, and he stops. Their track time actually rewinds from realizing killing her means killing himself. He, like all, faced a sacrificed love, or the ability to find happiness, to kill all to avoid facing oneself, the greatest pain. No trauma or physical pain dissuades him from piloting, but rather, fearing it won't earn kindness. By doing so, he joins even the background characters, his classmates who were potential pilots and nerves personnel and unknowingly supporting Seilei. By not striving to understand each other, all lend to the division of humanity, culminating in the longing for instrumentality. Ray criticizes industry by saying, "I'll escape the fear of the unknown by barely illuminating it," advancing science, so painful truths are ignored. Scientist dialogues and philosophizing overlap, intellectualizing to prevent actual communication, joining Futsuki in being criticized for seeking worldly understanding to escape from others. Kaji, who feigns stoic comfort from his understandings, is shocked when Shinji reveals his philosophizing critiques himself. Instead of peering inwards through his connections with others, he peers outwards through conspiracies. Misato, aiming at the same place as anonymous assailant, shoots him, implying betrayal of humanity at large. By intellectualizing to escape reality, the scientists only realize their mistake once they cause second impact, paralleling nerves personnel once third impact's initiated. Science, conspiracies, philosophy, esotericism, and so forth are pointless if not used for interpersonal understanding. Shinji watches a film dramatizing second impact. The audience asleep and disheveled, using reality as white noise to escape. His eyes blankly watch until he notices a couple embracing each other, and his eyes dilate in anger before escaping his loneliness through his dreams. His objects in place of Asuka, Misato, and Rei assure he's only lonely because his avoidance of others prevents him from understanding others, consequently himself, breeding his delusion of being hated. Recognizing his true self exists beyond his delusion, he realizes he can love himself. By focusing solely on himself, already merged with Rei, he merges with Asuka and Misato by believing he shattered his delusion, to enhance a new one where others still resemble objects, now enamoring him. He's regressed godhood as an object of worship. Asuka's left eye, her need for his love, confronts him. The cross in the theater, ourself watching the film, ripples into El Ciel to face our shared delusion, pulling from communication technology to the sun, using our darkness to glimpse our potential. The inhuman, objects, cat, and industry are fetishized before the fan motif, backed yellow, regresses to a woman objectified to breast and limbs, seen briefly as merely sexual and maternal. A darkened swing reaches the sun to bring our darkness further to light by regressing into the city on a track. Buildings from Eva merge with actual buildings. Industry enhances fiction, or our delusions in merging with reality, beyond our control. Resultantly, our conceptualizations of others replace others, objectifying them, as people packed like canned fish don't acknowledge each other, like the sea watching Eva. Their bodies merge as they're asked, "Does it feel good?" Keel thinks so, but the actresses of the woman whom Shinji objectifies for his delusion stare somberly at us. Audiences seek their seats to fade out to them being passed by hordes, while the audiences, even after seeing our shared pain in Eva, still, like all, escape, forcing the actual people we've replaced with idealized versions to suffer. In an extended cut, they're shown struggling to be on time for their menial office jobs, while they privately condemn each other, with the most exciting aspect of their lives being their loveless relationships, likened to instrumentality as they speak of solely being used for their bodies. Consequently, they were replaced with their characters, represented as mannequins facing away, unable to show emotion or hurt us, as total objectification or escape, intensifying the blue filter while suspending time, contrasting the passage of time implied by their actual selves. Seeing the unreal as indistinguishable from the real, Shinji affirms reality as a dream, where nothing's actually unreal, but he sees how society has objectified all, forcing us into fantasies devoid of actual selves, causing him to not exist, ignored while beckoning for Asuka. Rei expands modernity as a delusion, an effort to replace reality by freeing one from pain. Despite people's efforts to create instrumentality, it's already the reality we live in, illustrated by him calling rain, LCL, the mood he is always in. In a downpour, he hides his eyes and ears as others fade away, hiding from the cross. He loops video game songs on his cassette player, like the current generation's desire to become video game protagonists, the role he hopes to fulfill by piloting, alongside the interesting cassette and vinyl from Longing for a Bygone Era, where we aren't doomed by the boomers' climate catastrophe, the second impact, leading to the third, the singularity, or death. After arriving at the inevitable destination of his lack of action, the end of any direction, with no others, the track shifts from episode 25, where he kills all, to 26, where he tries to affirm life, to leave his personal instrumentality. The rain stops, but he passes a puddle reflecting a host club enticing him back by objectifying. Yet, he keeps walking left, his desire for love carrying him. So, the film finishes, the audiences leave, to reveal they still form the cross while watching, to represent entertainment can't allow escape, but whether we face the cross, the self, immersed in blue, our dream. Our oneness makes the self an illusion, but it's only in this dream of division that we can understand ourselves, thus find love. Letters of Gratitude and Death Threats realizes Eva as the creator's sincere expression, forcing understanding audiences to face the self. Shinji's objectified conceptions plaster the screen in devotion to us, inquiring our desire. He turns left from the viewer's yearning for painlessness by facing the actual Rei to confess fearing rejection, which she interprets as the desire for love. By facing his true self, he accepts his similarities with Asuka to confront their inability to find love by rejecting themselves. So, Shinji submits again to his objectified conceptions before his mothers, Yui and Rei, force him to understand he seeks not happiness, but to be valued by others. So, he and Asuka use the ego to escape their feelings of worthlessness by deluding that it's all they are. If he's more than his ego, the collective, his ego, asks who he, an individual sinking into the abyss, is. His representations, drawings, his name, possessions, others' judgments, his self-evaluation, are aspects of himself. Yet, since he's more than the concepts he's associated with, he continues fading and enacts instrumentality from believing he has no self, making him worthless. So, everything comes to an end as he's reduced to a sketch, with complete control over existence. He receives gravity to demonstrate he's now free to be whoever he wants, as he's understood in relation to his surroundings. But he can't decide who he wants to be. He fades from existence, asking, why? Because we understand ourselves in relation to others, or one's formless into understanding other shapes, or people clarifying one's own shape. He imagines himself, consequently others fitting his concept of normal by lacking social inhibition. It still resembles instrumentality as an existence of objects in place of people, with girls' yellow clothing marking them as objects for the pussy-whipped guys. But it's the most non-self-understanding Shinji can conjure to affirm only needing to be himself to be loved. With Gendo and Kaji's submission to their suicidal desire, he's forced to carve his own path. Merged with Rei, her hunched over from fulfilling her longing for unification with humanity, or death, his brown eyes channel Misato's, like when analyzing the self, as he sends the cross from his left hand to his right, following her affirmation of life. She warns he'll suffer again. Yet, he smiles that his affirmation sends himself towards love. Duality is restored, the horizontally proximal planets their potential and darkness, the vertical consciousness and subconsciousness. His left hand divides her so they can love, and for the first time, is affirmed she's more than an object through his right hand holding hers. The yellow, objectified skin pigments human to shift from the redness of desire and freedom, as gravity sinks them to the blue of his solitary dream, so he can meditate on his cross, the self, to glimpse the boundaries of his delusion, or how he differentiates from others. He recognizes he, like all, lead their lives as if stage shows, confined to chairs from their lack of action as inanimate people, resembling objects fade in and out. He breaks the 180-degree cinematographic rule, like Gendo and Kaji when discussing conspiracies, to avoid eye contact with anyone other than his own conception of himself as an object, as they deliver already known truths. That by leading this solitary existence, he is able to delude himself into believing anything about himself. The stage lights gaining shutters to focus solely on what he chooses to delude. So, he hears contradictory judgments from the same people, realizing by not knowing them, he's deluded judgments to fit the self-conception he chooses to delude, also the fault of others like Toji, who sets the receiver down as rain, LCL, pours his escape from the self-understanding facing Shinji would yield, from, alongside having beaten him, their shared paternal neglect. Likewise, Shinji's introduced failing to reach someone by phone, paralleled by Asuka, to embody loneliness. He destroys Gendo's invitation before taping it to meet him and express his hatred, but he cries while holding the invitation in his left hand, the same holding the phone, from using hatred to veil his unsatisfied desire for love. We delude to maintain our egos. The characters project even onto obscure industrial imagery to heighten we're overwhelmed by an excessive amount of information. Unable to make sense of it, even the insignificant reflects our projections. Yet, the screens of text confront not just the characters, but the viewer, implying even with our subjectivity, we have to confront the same truths. Yet, each person's personal delusion is reality, and truths only found if recognized as greater than reality, as who one truly is, their full potential and darkness, is found by understanding why one's produced their delusion, or what one's afraid to face about oneself, only possible by striving to understand others. So, he rises from his chair to understand others' delusion before confronting his own by realizing he's not engaging with the actual Rei and Kaworu by his conceptions of them, and asks what they represent about himself. They represent the faith that we can love each other. He separates himself from the divine by crosses and, like Misato, calls faith a delusion. He enacts instrumentality again. But his desire for love is too strong. He escapes into nature again before confronting society, a yellow road line extending his ego in between Rei and Kaworu, synthesizing their duality of nurturing and free will through the hand motif to use his ego to adopt faith. Rei's behind him from his need for love hanging over him. Her head severs at the neck to fulfill Kaworu's sacrifice for him, her blood staining the moon to make one's affirmation of life an influence on all, unconsciously. With none to serve, her body loses form like her clones. Crosses sever the womb to return life. Emerging from her left eye, Yui's nurtured into godhood. She announces truths only discovered in the unknown other, who allows one to discover their own self. Ideas change us by affecting how we see each other or ourselves. Imagination brings us closer to seeing what's actually there. The passage of time merely our sense of how we've changed, making time illusory, with Asuka's drawings preceding events yet to happen, Kaji's and her death, and instrumentality taking place out of order. In other words, one can only leave instrumentality if they choose to, which is possible if one acts on their vague idea of who they are, an ego, understood as being less than one actually is. Yui becomes divine by crucifying herself to give up her own humanity to preserve others. Instead of coaxing Shinji from the womb with both of her hands, she caresses him with her right hand as, instead of descending in instrumentality, he ascends from his own will by donning the cross. Fulfilling Myra Hess, Jesus' joy of man's desiring somber return to reality, as Shinji tries to shed his solipsism, defenses against pain, narcissistic self-loathing, fear of love, escape, to affirm mortality as greater than the spiritual afterlife, Ba and Yui embrace while descending into the womb. Lilith's halved face confirms division. Time passes. He's nailed Misato's cross to embody her as divine for his sacrifice. Her necklace's infinity sign, affirming all can reject the Kabbalist infinity knot, alluring death's tempestuous red seas. Contrasting his confusion over life, he wakes on white sand, motifing him learning of understanding himself in relation to others. He sees the divine Rei who, after confronting him in transportation environments to arrive at an inevitable destination or realization, has set him free to find self-understanding, as she does to, alongside him in the beginning, Yui, freeing her into godhood. He recognizes Asuka, the only other who's affirmed life, only for her torso and breasts, backed by instrumentality sees as an object. He straddles her to affirm his self, contrasting him being bottomed throughout instrumentality. The waves swash. He resumes. Her stabbed left eye having never been loved, her bandaged right arm, the pain she suffered from protecting herself, navigates between his hands, his will to kill himself through her from feeling unloved, and, with the same hand he sends the cross to affirm life, caresses him, extending herself to him to express they're the same. She holds his left eye, their shared need for love, to demonstrate the silent words, I need you, which kills if merely uttered and not demonstrated, as Gendo does to Ritsuko or Rei to Maya, and implicatively, Kaji to Misato. He promises to utter what he couldn't bring himself to prior to meeting her through instrumentality, leading to them fucking eternally. Yet, Shinji only recognizes her gesture as affirming he can be loved, paralleling his mother's caress, and shifts from Death's background to join her embracing only his potential, colored white from believing she's dead, as he cries on her like one comatose. He curls into the fetal position to cry into her chest, like a child. Like when rejecting instrumentality, she looks downwards to top him and the collective of humanity to call us. Both have regressed to their prior delusions by confusing loneliness for hatred, emphasized by the shot of his left hand and her right to show he unconsciously seeks her love. Yet, not all is lost. Throughout their lives, the protagonists unconsciously join to play the canon in D, a song that becomes more meaningful with each repetition. Eva imitates life as a story that repeats, where the motifs are arranged to gradually bring truth's seeming obscurity, or constant deceiving each other, to a confrontation of love and compassion. Each time our cycle repeats, we're brought closer to understanding each other, thus, love. Both crucified Evas represent Shinji and Asuka's condition, the broken telephone poles in front of Lilith's left hand, the breakdown in communication over there, or all's desire for love. Yet, they affirm life not by immediately expecting love, but by embracing the pain of misunderstanding each other from realizing love is the struggle to understand the pain others experience. We'll never be free of delusion, thus pain, because being subjects as opposed to objects is the only way we can love. With their recognition of reality, Earth gains a comet in red soil, with Adam emitting Saturn's sounds in the prior cataclysm, to resemble Saturn, astrologically symbolizing hell. Gendo expresses concern over bringing Shinji into the hell that is Earth, but Yui explains, with the will to connect with others, one has the potential to create heaven or find love. Even if it means only finding a single other who sometimes understands us, our efforts will forever benefit others. Like anyone who shares truth, Eva's creator, Hideaki Anno, was threatened with death. Yet, he was his own greatest threat. He confessed, sticking his foot out, waiting to lose balance and fall. He thought, I should die. As a child beaten by his father, he shed his humanity to enamor industry, painting into weaving power lines and catwalks. Losing interest in ordinary life, he rebelled through a vegetarian diet and imitation of astronauts. A teacher made him stay behind until he ate his meal. At 8 p.m., the teacher gave up. He was admitted to an elite school, but his test scores ranged between 8 and 98%, as he was instead devoted to astrology and animation. He dropped out for mentorship from Hayao Miyazaki, who emphasized the requirements for success: being poor, unknown, and to no matter what, make friends. Miyazaki broke Anno's Walkman, but Anno criticized him for being too afraid to present self-loathing and complexes. He asked if Ghibli's familiar with despair. They show superficial happiness. Although the technique is there, it lacks the blood that flows in everyone. In the 12 years I've known him, he's lost a lot. Anno left Ghibli. The Big Bang creates the cosmic womb and the Kabbalist god of the physical world, Adam Kadmon, who Yui resembles by taking its place. The tree of life breeds the soul, who approaches life, like Shinji leaving the womb. Like when enacting instrumentality, crosses flash to introduce the logo. The lyrics imitate Shinji's solipsistic music to shadowed, objectified female bodies. The opening implies his pessimism that the series will be abused to maintain viewers' own instrumentalities, while ignoring his invitation to consider why we're here, with his Shinto agnosticism entailing people have spiritual essence. Yet, he thought, I mustn't run away. He confronted his actual target of critique, himself. He derived the characters from himself to allegorize his life. Kaworu was based on Ikuhara, creator of Sailor Moon and Utena, after he affirmed Anno at a bathhouse. Rei expanded from a critique of ideals for submissive women to a representation of the subconscious. The pornographism, originally his desperation to have his message heard, turned around to criticize his, thus our sexism. So, like the forces trying to silence Asuka, he bared his teeth when she thought of her death. Likewise, the fetishization of industry and obviously written characters speak to us seeing people as less complex than they are, as we seek objects in place of people to avoid being hurt, to the point we confuse people for objects. The conspiracy theories, stemming from widespread governmental distrust, criticize our tendency to deflect our own contributions to societal problems. The esotericism targets the emphasis on worldly understanding over people, with even the most advanced scientific institution erroneously calling aliens fighting for survival divine, stemming from the misanthropic belief we are not enough, as the aliens fall in love with us. Yet, his conviction his efforts would meet unconditional acceptance signaled his demise. Reactions ranged from death threats to claims that saved fans' lives. Others chose not to understand, misinterpreting it or writing it off as meaningless, or as a result of budgetary limitations, despite official statements that their budget wasn't short. The final episode was planned. He compared himself to the Aum Shinrikyo's leader from realizing he imitated the archetype of his enemy by intending something like a religion of his own, complete with many uses of the Holy Trio, promising himself instrumentality upon leaving instrumentality. He planned suicide. Suddenly, he received a phone call. The words of concern proceeding from the receiver became joy on my end. I rejoiced in receiving some recognition. Thank you, from the bottom of my heart, Miyazaki. A dilemma arose. I didn't want to encounter others, yet I wanted to. He subverted our desire to die, represented by not moving on from Eva, by supplanting the animated red cross against black with a real white cross against blue to affirm life, remaking the same ending but from a different perspective, by depicting regression to delusion interspersed with genuine love, supplanting the original take care of yourself that reaches a congratulations for us, the children, overcoming the desire to return to the womb as we wave farewell to our spiritual parents with I need you, to show we can only improve by recognizing our dependency on each other. Yui expresses he created Eva in imitation of God. That is, he created a world to send himself to die, to mirror the self of each person by making us see ourselves in relation to him. As such, the reason we analyze Eva is to understand ourselves. After all, how we treat each other is how we treat ourselves, and we all hurt each other from the same unsatisfied longing for love, the fundamental truth we constantly try but fail to express. Since we're alive, the story isn't finished. Yet, he maintains that it already has an ending, the original, to speak of the faith needed that we can dry our own worlds of instrumentality once our struggle for acceptance is met by our communities. By saying Shinji is the self, Anno revealed we're the same. He defines himself as a broken man who put everything he knew into Eva.